Hi and welcome back to Orsa Knits. I'm Icy and today I'm going to be discussing some free autumn patterns with you. I compiled this list while I was trawling through Ravelry looking for some cute ideas for when the weather finally gets that little bit colder here in Rome. It's still really warm, about 26 degrees every day, but I've got my fingers crossed that it will get cold very, very soon. So yeah, let's dive into the list. So pattern number one is the beautiful Autumn Dream by an independent designer called Emma Do. This is such a stunning, very, very feminine and floaty sort of blouse type jumper. It has really intricate lace and bobble work around the yoke, and it's in a really beautiful colour, sort of a rusty autumnal shade. I think it would work equally well in any of those other sort of autumn leaf colours, so browns, yellows and kind of rust or coppery hues. I really, really like this pattern because it's knit in 2 strands of mohair. Now, I'm sure if you watch this channel, you quite possibly like mohair just as much as I do. I really enjoy knitting with it, and I find that it adds a lot of luxury and polish to many garments. It gives it that sort of finishing touch that I think really brings something together. So yeah, I had to include some obviously on my autumn list. The other element of this pattern that I really enjoy is the very wide balloon sleeves. I am a fan of a wide sleeve. I think that it gives a sort of whimsical and romantic look to a lot of jumpers, and that combined with the very pretty lacework at the yoke just creates a very, very sweet, very romantic jumper. Pattern number 2 and 3 are by the same designer, and it is from the lovely ladies over at Espace Tricot. They have a wealth of really gorgeous patterns on their Ravelry, most of which are free, so it's a really, really good resource if you're looking for something free to knit. They also do have a YouTube channel that I will link down below, along with all of the links to each of these patterns. This jumper is called The Classic, and it's exactly that. It's a really, really timeless, simple piece knit in 1 strand of Isiga alpaca and a strand of silk mohair. So yes, mohair again, but I think that this lends this jumper a beautiful soft halo that really, really brings the whole piece together. I really, really enjoy some of the design elements on this fairly simple jumper. The neckline is quite high and goes up into a sort of mock neck, and I do like that sometimes instead of a traditional rolled turtleneck, because I do find it can be a little bit more flattering. It also has some splits down on the hem near the hips, which if you're anything like me and you're a little bit pear-shaped, is an absolute godsend, because I do find it sometimes a little bit difficult to make sure I knit something with the right amount of ease down at my hips, because my bust is significantly smaller than my hips. Therefore, if I just go off a bust measurement, sometimes I do get a little bit too much sort of a tightness around the hip region, but this completely covers you if you're like me, and it has split hems and 25 centimeters of positive ease, so it has a loose, relaxed and very comfy look to it. This second pattern from Espace Tricot is called the Missoni Accomplished, so named after the Italian designer who would use those funky waves in a lot of his knit designs. And I think that this is a really great, flattering piece. I would probably make it in navy and white myself, because I like the idea of putting those stripes in white and kind of playing around with the notion of a nautical, sort of a classic nautical jumper, but because it's wavy, it gives it a little bit of character and something a little bit more playful. I also think because this is in 2 colours and it's quite simple, it would be a great way for somebody to dip their toe into knitting with more than 1 colour before they took on a slightly more ambitious colourwork yoke. I also like the fact that this jumper has quite a lot of give and almost flares a little bit down at the bottom near the hips. As I mentioned before, I do enjoy quite a bit of ease around the hips. I think that it gives it a better line and a little bit more of an elegant silhouette. This pattern calls for a very lovely wool, and I reckon I would probably knit it in a nice squidgy plump merino, just to up that snuggly factor. I also think it would work really, really well layered over several things because of the give that it has, which would make it a really good choice for autumn knitting, because I think layering is what autumn is all about. Speaking of slightly more ambitious colourwork projects, the next pattern that I'm bringing to you is called Autumn, and it's by another small independent designer. And this is a slightly more ambitious colourwork yoke, which is knit from the bottom up. So if you've never done that before, it could be a good one to practice, as it is knit in bulky weight yarn, therefore it should knit up really quite quickly. This pattern calls for a bulky lopi, so an Icelandic yarn, which I know that some of you can find quite scratchy if your skin is particularly sensitive to more rustic wools. But I reckon if you swapped this for a squishy or more cuddly, maybe alpaca or merino blend, you could make something just as beautiful that just has that extra snuggle factor. I really love the colours that she has chosen for this, and I think that it would work also with some more autumnal shades, maybe keeping a red but building in some yellows and some creams and beiges and browns. I reckon that it would make a really, really beautiful and very seasonal piece that way. Something that I also like about this jumper is that it is unisex, therefore it would be great if you're thinking about knitting gifts for Christmas, and it would also be nice and quick because of the bulky weight. I have this sort of fantasy that one day my boyfriend will let me make us matching jumpers for Christmas, and this might be just the one for that. I discovered this next pattern when I was watching lovely Karoline's podcast here on YouTube. She's called Karoline's Knits. I completely recommend checking out her channel. She knits some really beautiful things, and this was one of the projects that she was tackling in the next coming weeks. And this is from a designer who I have made something from before. I know I butcher the pronunciation of her name, but I would say it as Hanne Rimmen. She is a lovely Scandinavian designer who makes a lot of very interesting colourwork yokes in simple neutral colours that I just really adore. I previously made her holly sweater, which does have some similarities to this one, which is called Nordstrand, and she has designed this in collaboration with Phil Collana, which is why it's offered for free for us. I really enjoy how this pattern almost seamlessly blends across the bust and onto the arms. I think it's extremely elegant, and I do also enjoy her choice of black and white for the colourwork, but I think if I were to make it, I would probably knit it up in a lovely hazelnutty brown and maybe a white or a cream for the colourwork. I also really love how this pattern features a funnel neck, which will keep you nice and cosy in autumn when you just want to throw on a blazer and you don't have to take a scarf with you because you've got it all wrapped up here. This next pattern is also by another designer that I just happened to stumble across on Ravelry. I believe that her name is Claudia Q for EweKnit Toronto, and she has a lot of free patterns on offer on Ravelry, so I will link her down below. Now, this particular one I chose from her interesting mix of free designs is called the Velvet Pullover, and it really stood out to me because of the way that she plays with textures and shades of mohair here. I find with jumpers that are worked with all of these increases at the yoke that they can sometimes be quite thin around the top, which is not necessarily always the look that you actually want to go for. Something that really stood out to me about this piece was how she creates a gradient down the body using different shades of mohair, but also incorporates in the thinness of the yoke into this gradient and sort of colour bleeding down into a darker shade at the bottom. I am also just completely in love with the different shades of mohair. I feel like this piece really shows how fun and versatile mohair can be when knitting jumpers. I know that it's not always everybody's cup of tea, but I do think that it lends a certain something to finished objects. It just makes them look more polished and luxurious and almost a little bit like cashmere. Now, pattern number 7 is the only pair of socks on my list. I wanted to include a pair of socks because I know that there are so many people out there who really love to make them. I will say I also find socks to be a great stash busting piece. I like to use up some of my scraps of fingering weight yarn that I have left over from larger jumper projects to make little pairs of socks. And I had this in mind when I selected this pattern, which is called the Colour Palette Socks by Moorats. I think that these are particularly good for anybody using up scraps because you can build in bits of colour blocking in almost any shade that you like. She uses these lovely colours to create a very subtle gradient throughout the socks, but I think it could be fun to really mix and match and play around with a lot of different tones. Or, of course, you could create a lovely autumnal gradient like autumn leaves. The other design element of this that I really enjoy is the beautiful textured stitches in between the colour blocks that almost look a little bit like picots. I think they lend a little bit of interest and texture to the whole piece. This next pattern has been something which has been on my to make list for absolutely ages. I really fell in love with it as soon as I saw it, and that is the Bas-Relief Wrap by Purl Soho. Purl Soho, like a lot of the other designers I've mentioned in this list, also have a really great choice of free patterns, and something that I really adore about this is that they have two sizes, which is something they frequently do with a lot of their wrap and shawl ideas. So you can make it into a full wrap, like displayed in the picture, or you can knit only one part of the repeats of that textured cable section and make it into a skinnier scarf. I feel like the textured section on this is reminiscent of a more traditional cabled scarf design, but it has elements like the bobbles that just make it that little bit more modern. I think that this would be really beautiful in the lovely white shell colour that they've used here, but I also think it would work in a wide range of other neutrals. The cabling does look a little bit fiddly, but I don't think that that will deter me. I feel like if you can rise to the challenge, this could be one of those pieces that you could give as a gift or maybe even hand down to somebody, and it would be a real treasure to them. I reckon it will go with so many of my coats and winter jackets and just be that beautiful finishing touch to my outfits. This next design is a much simpler option, also from Purl Soho, and it's something that I feel like I've been after for absolutely ages, which is a soft, chunky and cute looking beanie. I know I am a little bit obsessed with hats, but I think I will definitely have to add this one to my wardrobe. This is called the Soft and Cushy Hat, and it is knit in a worsted weight yarn with some special techniques in there that make it that bit extra plump. Something I really like about this is that I can imagine myself throwing it on and it would just lend a sort of casual, almost athleisure look to some of my slightly dressier outfits. I also think it would keep your head super warm and cozy, or be a great gift option. I know that I really enjoy knitting hats. I just find them so quick and satisfying, and I like the fact that you don't have to use that much yarn when you're knitting a hat, so you can spend a tiny bit more on a really special ball of yarn to give to somebody or just to keep for yourself. This final pattern is something little and cute and a bit silly to make just because it's October, and that is a knitted pumpkin. Now this pattern, which is called the Spice and Clove pumpkins, I selected just because it gives you the option to knit and crochet your pumpkin. I know that I am really into Halloween. When I was growing up, because I grew up abroad, we didn't celebrate Halloween that much outside of small events at school, and therefore now I'm older, I get super into it. I am obsessed with horror films and I just really love it. I take it as an excuse to just be a little bit silly. So I will be knitting probably a couple of these in a few different colours and dotting them about. I have a few other Halloween ideas that I might share with you in the coming weeks as well. Try this one out. It's going to be good practice for me because I want to learn how to crochet too. I'm pretty confident with my knitting now, but my mum is a really good crocheter and I watch her and have been meaning to give it a proper go, and this might be the perfect starting point. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you find something on this little list that you fancy making this autumn. I think it is my absolute favourite time of year, and it's a great occasion to layer up some of your knits and really show them off because they won't be hidden under a massive winter coat just yet.